Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers that cover the NFL on a daily basis. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your host, Erin Summers.
Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. I'm Erin Summers, back from the NFL Combine in Indy. And if you missed any of our coverage from there, you can check it out on NewOrleans.Saints.com. We were able to catch up with head coach Dennis Allen, AGM Jeff Ireland, as well as defensive end Cameron Jordan, who was roaming the halls before he was on the NFL Network broadcast. It was a really fun event. We got to see a lot of people talk a lot of football. One such person who was there in attendance, NewOrleans.Football's Mike Triplett. He's going to join John DeShazier and myself on the podcast here for his thoughts post-Combine, as well as what he expects the Saints to do looking forward to the NFL draft. And we're going to remember one of the best to ever cover the NFL, Chris Mortensen. Mike, thank you for joining us on the New Orleans Saints podcast. How are you doing? Have we recovered from the Combine?
Yeah, I don't take the Combine to the maximum. I try to run into people near coffee shops instead of bars at 2 a.m. But no matter where you are at the Combine, you run into people and you have good conversations. It is quite the NFL convention, in addition to being the showcase for the college players being drafted.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun event. And as you mentioned, lots of who's who in the NFL shows up. We had a chance to talk to, obviously, head coach Dennis Allen and assistant general manager Jeff Ireland. What was just some of the stuff that stood out to you the most about those conversations?
Well, I mean, one of the things we wanted to talk to them about for the first time on the record was, the change to Clint Kubiak and the offensive system they're bringing in, obviously with a lot of veteran assistants who were part of the old Mike Shanahan and Gary Kubiak trees, which they're really borrowing from, I think, even more than the Kyle Shanahan tree, even though they're doing a little of both. Some of these assistants have worked for both guys. And just, they are really committed to this system because of what it's going to do for their run game, their play action passing game. They're trying to put their offensive line and their run game and Derek Carr in a good position, more than necessarily lighting up scoreboards. You can probably accomplish both at the same time, but just the amount of times we heard them say run game and play action passing game, they just want to do what makes this offense work. And look, they are going to borrow from some of the, as Dennis Allen said, the best system going in the NFL right now, but it is also about the best system that they think to put their current personnel, like Derek Carr, like Chris Olave, like Alvin Kamara, and others in a position to succeed. So doesn't mean it'll work, but it was the number one thing they had to do this offseason, and it's hard not to feel good about where, the reasons behind the choices they made.
Yeah, I think the coaching change, basically everyone on that side, the offensive side of the ball, has changed over, is going to be huge going into this season to determine how far this team goes this year. What are you kind of expecting with maybe some of the players that they'll utilize differently?
Yeah, you got to make Derek Carr work. And we saw, I think, he had tremendous numbers. I think it really went under the radar how good he played over the last 6 weeks of the season. We've used the stat a few times: 15 touchdowns and 3 interceptions over the last 6 games. His passer rating was the best of any quarterback in the NFL, except for Mason Rudolph, who only started 4 games in that stretch for the Steelers. So, and the big change they made is a lot more play action passing. It puts the offensive line in a good position, doesn't ask them to do as much. And so I think that will help if they're really going to be focused on that. And then I think it'll help guys like Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed. Obviously I work with Nick Underhill at NewOrleans.Football, and he had unearthed a stat about, even dating back to Sean Payton and Drew Brees being here, yards after the catch has sort of disappeared from the Saints offense. Getting the ball to Alvin Kamara, to Chris Olave, to Rashid Shaheed on quick passes in space and then letting them gain yards after the catch is another element that I think they can really, really help this offense. We did a show last night, though, But the offensive line is going to kind of make or break this thing. I mean, we have big question marks about Ryan Ramczyk because of health. Are they going to bring back Andrews Pete? Is Trevor Penning or Nick Saldiveri going to be able to come along? Will this be where they go with the first pick in the draft? The coaching staff has to help this offensive line, but I think there's other tweaks that need to be made in that group as well.
Mike, I don't know if you know it, but you kind of committed a cardinal sin there, saying all those nice things about Derek Carr. So watch yourself. Watch yourself. With the offensive line issues that the Saints encountered as they exited the season, and they're very much in flux, it seems, at that position. What do you think they'll do? Because we don't necessarily know if Ryan Ramczyk is going to be the Ryan Ramczyk of 4 years ago, and we don't know if Andrews Pete is going to be another consistent left tackle, even if they keep him. And we Nets don't have any idea what's going to happen with Trevor Penning.
Yeah, John, I really do believe in the best available player concept in the draft. You do not want to go into a draft and say we have to draft a blank. That's all about who's going to be an all-pro for you 3 years from now, 4 years from now. It could be a receiver, it could be a safety. It's who's the special player that you've got this great grade on. But that being said, man, it makes so much sense for them to be drafting an offensive tackle in round one because, first of all, if you saw the combine workouts and the reactions to them on Sunday, if you've been reading any mock drafts, it's just the first round is littered with offensive tackles that people are really excited about, and in the range where the Saints are picking at 14. I mean, from picks 10 to 25, half the picks might be offensive tackles this year, and so I think they can get good value there. But yeah, I mean, we said this last night when we went through the starting five. If Ryan Ramczyk is penciled in as your starter at right tackle, you feel good about him, but you don't know about his long-term health. If you bring back Andrews Pete and put him back in at left tackle, he can do that maybe for a year. James Hurst could do left guard again, maybe for a year. Feel better about McCoy and Ruiz, but there's a short-term need there. There's also a long-term need there. It just screams value is there, need is there, long-term need is there. Boy, oh boy, would we feel better about this offense as a whole, about this offensive line, if they were bringing in a prized draft pick at number 14 to add to this offensive line. I hate to say you got to do that. There's other players at other good positions too. You probably get good value in the second round too because of how many good ones there are. But boy, it just makes so much sense to check a lot of boxes.
Yeah. Can we see a renaissance of Alvin Kamara? Because he seems like he's still got some pop left, and yet last year we didn't see the pop plays, the 20-yard runs or the 30-yard runs, or the broken tackles and the things that we've seen Alvin Kamara do in the past.
Yeah, look, part of that you can never get Alvin Kamara the past. Unfortunately, Father Time gets everybody. It really gets running backs. He's going to be 28. It's going to be his 8th year in the NFL. Very, very, very few running backs have ever overcome that. And look at guys who are in his class or in his range. I mean, Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott, Derrick Henry. I mean, you just see it. They hit a wall. And that's probably, unfortunately, going to happen for Alvin Kamara. But I don't think he's quite there yet. And I think the key for him is getting him out in space. He still makes guys miss. He can still run through a guy or two. It's that second level. Get him against linebackers. Get him against defensive backs. Get him out of the middle of this offensive line. I mean, the Saints had the second worst yards per carry of any running back in the league last year. And that was, Jamal Williams' numbers were worse than Alvin's, and we didn't see a lot of Kendry Miller. And that's been a couple years now where this run game, they're just not opening holes. So I think the radical change, not radical change, they're going to run a very similar system. They liked outside zone running already, but just the focus on, we are bringing in a proven system that makes the run game work. I think that'll help all of them, and I think it'll really help Alvin if they can get him out to that second level of the defense. I think it went kind of unnoticed. Last year was a start. He was on pace for 100 catches last year if he had played a full 17-game season. So they know that's still a big part of his game too.
Yeah, he still seems to have a little something in him. We know there's been a lot of talk about what the Saints are going to do at safety, obviously, with no markets made. But you look at the linebacker unit, and Demario Davis is kind of the freakish thing where he's the Wolverine.
He's about 10 years away from needing to be replaced.
Yeah, I was about to say he's like the Wolverine. He says he wants to keep on playing even after LeBron's done playing.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like LeBron's going to stop. But I mean, do the Saints need to make some contingencies there? I mean, he's obviously aging a bit. Pete Werner has played well, but he's had had a couple of injuries here and there where
Yeah.
he hadn't been able to go.
My biggest concern with this Saints team is how old they're getting. E- Everywhere. I mean, you need to replenish for the future at linebacker. You need to replenish right away, but certainly for the future at defensive end, where Cam Jordan's starting to show signs of age. You need to replenish for the future at safety, where they already released Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu in his 30s at the other starting spot. You need to replenish for the future at corner if you're considering trading Marshawn Lattimore. We just talked about needing to replenish for the future at offensive line. And it's my biggest concern with the team. You just can't. And they don't have a lot of draft picks. They only have a first rounder, a second rounder, and then not again until round 5. So, boy, would this be a great year to have 10 draft picks in the first 2 days to replenish all that. So you can't fix all those holes. And the thing about linebacker is Demario Davis and Pete Werner are going to start for this team. They're going to play every snap for this team as long as they're healthy. So you can't really go the free agency route because you wouldn't be signing somebody who's going to play. They'd be an emergency backup plan. So, yeah, it'd be nice to draft that position, but is that where they're going to draft in round 1 or round 2? Maybe, maybe not. It might be a 5th rounder that they hope that pans out, or it might be whenever Demario Davis finally does hang it up, then it becomes an emergency priority right then and there.
Do you have the sense that, or is it your feeling also that the Saints are kind of, obviously the administration, I believe, believes they're fairly close.
Yeah.
Because, you don't do some of the things that the Saints have done without believing you're pretty close. Do they look pretty close? I mean, because it's, a lot of it seems to be contingent on, this set of guys being healthy and this guy returning to some form and, maybe getting a little bit more production out of,
Right.
Cam Jordan and that kind of thing at defensive end. So, I mean, is it one of those things where I don't necessarily know, you can never get a perfect storm in the NFL?
Right.
But do they need something, I guess, close to a perfect storm?
Yeah, I mean, they are close. They're obviously close. They just went 9-8. There were games they could have won that they didn't. Any one of any number of games. Hold on to a 17-point lead against Green Bay. You're in the playoffs. Tampa Bay went 9-8 and won their first round playoff game. Went to the second round of the playoffs. Saints are very close to being able to do that. I think they should have won the division the year before that. They were a snap away from going to the playoffs the year before that. So they still exist as that team that is right there with all the other. I mean, 3 9-8 teams went to the playoffs and won playoff games this year. Houston and Green Bay did as well. They are in that group. I don't think they're in that group with their arrow pointing up, though. I think they're in that group with, as long as they've still got Alvin Kamara and Demario Davis and Cam Jordan and Tyrann Mathieu and Ryan Ramczyk, they're in that group. When those guys aren't part of it either, I don't know who steps up and continues playing at that same level right now, which I think is, I think that's why the fans are kind of so disenchanted with this team right now. I think everyone would be okay with 9-8 if your arrow's pointing up. I think Houston fans are thrilled. Green Bay fans are thrilled. I just don't think the fans love, okay, so we're trying to go 10-7 this year, get 2 rounds into the playoffs. Whoopee. It doesn't excite people that much if that's your swan song. But you can see why the Saints are doing it. I mean, they don't want to be the Carolina Panthers right now. They want to be like, yeah, we're going to slowly catch up with the cap. We're going to try to hit on some draft picks that we haven't necessarily hit on in recent years. And in the meantime, we're also going to try to win the division. So as long as they do that without completely mortgaging their future, and we could spend hours talking about the cap. I don't think they are mortgaging the future the way so many other people think they are with their cap management. I get why they operate this way, and they probably should already have one division title in the last 3 years, and they easily could finally get that done this year.
Okay, I'm going to ask you something that you can't answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Why is there such a division with Derek Carr? You mentioned the way he finished the season, and I thought he was really, really good down the stretch of the season, and yet I don't know if it's a vocal minority or a vast majority, but folks don't seem to want to warm to him.
I think it's a combination of things. First of all, you can't what's the expression? You can't make up for a first impression. You never get a second chance to make a first impression.
Yeah.
He wasn't that great to start. And look, there's an adjustment period that comes whenever somebody starts with a new offense. I get that. His performance wasn't that great. Part of it was because he had the major shoulder injury in week 3. That red zone stuff was just like maddening. It was the thing that had plagued him before he came here, and then they just like the things they were doing in the red zone. That Atlanta game when they went like 0 for 7 once they crossed the 35, and including a pick six that he threw, it just snowballed into this. And then I think one of the things that really hurt him right around that time is when he was publicly saying things like, "Oh, this doesn't bother me. Why? I don't know why you guys are so bothered about it. I'm not bothered by it." Like, I think people want to hear, "I can't sleep at night. This isn't good enough,"
Yeah.
But obviously behind the scenes, it bothered him. He wanted to be better at it. I just don't think people took to that. I don't know why the fans are so upset. I don't know why the media is so upset. Everything's fine to me. Like, it's going to be all right. It's like, no, it's not. But then look, he put his money where his mouth is. He played good football. All along, my expectations for him, and I think the fans' general expectations for him, just be like what Kirk Cousins has been for Minnesota. Ryan Tannehill when he first came to Tennessee, and they needed a good solid quarterback just to make their offense go. And my expectations for him are kind of back to where they were at this time last year. Cautious optimism. Not expecting a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, but that next tier, that 11 to 15 type of quarterback, he wasn't that for the first 3 months of last season. He was that for the last 6 weeks of last season. And especially because of how much they've invested in improving this offense, I'm at least willing to think it's possible that he is that this season. But if he's not, then you have to have some hard decisions about whether you need to be looking for that rookie. And I don't think this is going to be the year they draft a rookie in the first round, but I think that's what everyone compares it to. I think there are a lot of people who are just tired of sort of this Groundhog Day the Saints are in right now, and kind of want some hope to be sold for the future.
You said that you feel pretty good about the cap space situation. How much of that is because of the 30 plus million that it went up this year?
Right. And that it's going to go up another, 20 million next year and 20 million the year after that. And look, this is kind of what we were preaching in when people were worried about this in 16, 17, 18, 19. And then COVID hit, and the cap actually went down by 30 million, or was 30 million less than expected. And then the next year is another 30 million less than expected for what they had been counting on. If that had never happened, I really think they would have been out of this already. But no, my only point about the cap is, of course it stinks. The Saints have, they're not going to go out and be big spenders in free agency this year. They did just sign Derek Carr for over 30 million a year last year, so it didn't stop them from doing that. But I think people keep thinking like that it is credit card debt, or that there's a snowball effect, and that when you push this back and you push this back, that one day they're going to be like, all right, we can't field a team anymore. It's more like there's this $160 million overage that they've had since 2018, and they just push it back and push it back and push it back. It doesn't grow into a bigger number.
There's no interest.
We'll pay it next year. There's no interest. Yeah. So they'll say, let's do it next year. 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 And they could theoretically do that forever. It has never stopped them from re-signing any of their key players. And the reason they're so far over the cap is because they re-signed Michael Thomas and Cam Jordan and Teron Armstead and Ryan Ramczyk and Marshawn Lattimore. They just happen to have a lot of Drew Brees, a lot of superstar players, Alvin Kamara. And they re-signed all those guys, and it hasn't stopped them from re-signing those guys. It hasn't stopped them from adding players like Derek Carr when they decide they need to. But it is a big albatross that, either eventually will catch up to them, or they'll catch up to it one year when if they keep drafting poorly and don't have guys to re-sign the $100 million contracts, then it'll take care of itself in a way they didn't really want it to take care of itself.
We talked to Ireland at the Combine, as I mentioned earlier, and one thing that he brought up was how they might change maybe some of the players they look at because of Kubiak now and the types of players he likes to work with, but also on the defensive side with the line and the way that they might be looking for an edge rusher. How do you think they're starting to evolve with some of the players they're looking for?
Yeah, both Dennis Allen and Jeff Ireland have made admissions that they need to sort of make room for that smaller edge rusher and make him fit their defense. I do not think they will change what they believe a defensive end should be. I still think they're always going to believe a defensive end needs to be big enough to hold up against the run. But I think they do believe they should make room for I don't know if I want to say situational edge rusher or outside linebacker who brings pass rush ability. I mean, we saw him doing it to some success with Zach Bond late last season. We saw him have some success with Caden Ellis doing that last season. And even if that meant a big free agent investment or first or second round draft pick and a guy who is more like 6'2", 240, 6'3", 250 than what we're used to seeing, closer to 280 pounds, 270 from those guys. I think they realize the speed of the game. They need to find that speed into their pass rush. I don't necessarily think they're going to completely change what their beliefs and their prototype about needing big guys to play on the defensive line, but they need to get faster one way or another. The ideal thing would be, I mean, I talked about drafting an offensive lineman in round one. If you could get someone like Dallas Turner from Alabama, who's got the frame to be, 6'4", 255 plus, and he's big and he's fast, that would be ideal.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many options out there, but as you said, going with maybe just the best available player is one way to do it. And I think that's usually how the Saints draft. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here, gosh, in like 50 days, I think, or so.
Well, I mean, obviously free agency comes first. They would love it if they could solve that defensive line pass rusher problem by spending, 20 million plus on one of these guys, although a lot of the best ones are being franchised today as we're recording this, Brian Burns and Josh Allen among them. It'd be nice to throw money at the problem, and that is something the Saints can't necessarily do. And look, no matter how you manage your cap, no matter how old your roster is, the best thing you can do for your team is draft well. I wouldn't say that Saints haven't drafted well in recent years. A lot of it has been injury. It would sure help if Trevor Penning figures out whatever hurdle he needs to get past, if Peyton Turner could stay healthy. But look, the reason this team had the best record in the league from like 2017 through 2022 was because of that 2016, 2017 draft classes. They haven't had those. You need to hit home runs in the draft to rebuild your roster. This team more than maybe most in the league.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, they don't have a lot of draft picks this year to do that with. Before we kind of close this thing out, this week, obviously longtime NFL reporter Chris Mortensen, who worked at ESPN for a long time, passed away. And you, formerly of ESPN, he was one of the best to do it. No offense to you, but how
none taken whatsoever.
What are some of your thoughts, or what did you know about him?
Yeah, look, the one thing that's really cool about Chris is long before we all started bleeding the lines between, print reporting and television reporting and video and podcasting. Now, no matter where you work, you do all of it. He was a newspaper guy that went to the TV world and opened the doors for a lot of us that took that same path. I was a newspaper guy who eventually got a chance at ESPN and spent a decade there. But the coolest thing about him, I mean, my interactions with him were certainly true of this, but I mean, everyone you're seeing, from the people who were his colleagues all along, his contemporaries that were his age, to people who were 20 years younger than him, and technically competition, people who worked with him, people who worked on the other side, all just talked about how gracious he was, how helpful he was, how supportive he was behind the scenes. And I mean, boy, we would all love for people to be saying those kind of things about us.
Yeah. JD, I know that you mentioned him starting in newspaper and an area you followed him early on in his career.
Yeah, he was at the Journal-Constitution in Atlanta at the same time I was at the Picayune, and Mike started at the Picayune also, and that's our colleague Brian Alley Walsh and Mike Strom. They know him as well as anybody. But I mean, he was one of those guys who he broke a lot of news in newspaper, and that was back in the day when you broke the news. Nobody else could actually catch up to you till the next day, because that entire day chasing down what you had in the newspaper. So he was one of those guys, and he was really, really good at it. So I could see why ESPN said, okay, we got to have this guy on air, because he broke so much news in Atlanta that it was ridiculous. So he basically created his own space for TV. And now it's a space that every station has to have, every major station has to have, because everybody's got to have one of those guys, because you got to have somebody who's on the clock 24/7 breaking news. And that's what Mort was in Atlanta. It was phenomenal to see, even though we were in the same division team-wise. But, obviously the Picayune and the Constitution were not competing together. So it was always fabulous to see him. And it was kind of like little scrap between he and Brian Walsh, who could break the most news for their respective teams. And Brian held his own. But I mean, Chris Mortensen broke a lot of national news that even today it remained wonderful. And he broke so much news that, he established so many relationships that people just trusted him. I heard a story yesterday that when Peyton Manning retired, even though Mort was in the hospital, he would not give the retirement story to anybody but Mort. Even though he was in the hospital, he was like, okay, you got to have this, because he was such a friend to the Manning family. So, he was that kind of guy and that kind of reporter. And obviously, sad to see him, pass, after fighting the disease, pretty well for a couple of years. But man, he was a phenomenal reporter. And it sounds like he was an even more phenomenal person.
Yeah, I think that's been a lot of the stories that I've heard as well, is just how great he was as a journalist, but even better as a person. And that is definitely a great legacy for him to leave behind. And condolences, obviously, from the Saints and from everybody to his family, after the passing. But Mike, I appreciate you joining us and kind of breaking down some of the post-combine chat, and looking forward to the draft. Hopefully there's a lot going on between now and then, and we have a lot more that we can kind of discuss, and pieces that are falling into place.
It's the best time of the year. I mean, they're going to add a couple free agents. They're going to add a couple draft picks. They're going to start selling hope. Everyone's going to be like, all right, I like this. Additions.
Yeah, the Saints, they're going to get somebody in free agency. They're going to get somebody.
Yeah.
And they're going to fill up some spots, and they're going to feel good going into the draft, even though they don't have a lot of draft picks, because they're going to fill up a decent amount of spots in free agency. They always seem to do it.
Yeah, I mean, they are going to have a number 14 pick. They are going to have a number 45 pick. They're probably going to have at least one notable free agent, if not a couple more. So, I mean, there are going to be reasons to feel better about this team. I mean, the big storyline is Marshawn Lattimore part of it, or does he turn into another draft pick? I guess we could sell hope either way. But it's a shame. I mean, he's probably the best player on the team. So you hope that. And it sounds like the only way they would trade him is if they're getting something pretty significant in return.
Yeah, that is definitely a storyline all of us will be watching for sure. Mike, again, thank you so much for joining us and for all the insight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints podcast. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleans.Saints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints podcast.